Hello, and welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way. With God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I'm going to forego the normal bio today because I'm going to focus on a very narrow portion of what God has blessed me to do. I was in the Marine Corps pre-9/11, and I was there waiting for the invasion of Iraq, which started in March of 2003, which means it's been 20 years since that invasion. I'm going to speak on small arms of the U.S. Marine Corps infantry. I was an assaultman during the invasion. This time, crossing the border into Iraq to taking Baghdad. Haven't decided yet whether this will come out in March or on April 9th, the day that Baghdad fell. Either way, 20 years since we invaded Iraq. There's that saying, every Marine a rifleman. So let's start off with the rifle. The M16 A2 U.S. Marine Corps 20-inch barrel A2 style adjustable sights, regulated out to 800 meters. The M16 A2. This was iron sight days. We had iron sights. They were adjustable iron sights. You got your regular aperture and your O2 aperture for nighttime, for CQB, for inside 200 yards. It's a shoulder-fired, magazine-fed, 5.56 millimeter NATO. We had safe, semi, and 3-round burst, although the 3-round burst was just kind of there. Very rare to find somebody that ever actually used that other than just to do it. The practicality of that is kind of up for debate, but it does have safe, semi, 3-round burst. M855 62 grain light armor piercing is what we had. We did have night vision and IR lasers, PEC-2s even way back then, kind of outside the scope of this. Sticking with the rifle, you got to remember back, this was 20 years ago, we had green web slings carried, parade style. That was what we had. Now we would modify those with zip ties, with taking 2 of them and kind of making our own more tactical sling to carry in front, the way that's become common today, but we were just issued green, very basic 2-point slings. The M16's A2s, at least that I had and that our unit had, were very old and very beat up, and let's just say they had seen better days. I don't know how old they were when we got them, but a lot of times they might be more silver than black on the metal parts. Max effective range on a point target, meaning a person, 550 meters. Max effective range on an area target, 800 meters. And those distances are kind of academic because in warfare, well, let's just say that's very optimistic. That's what we had. Full-size M16A2 20-inch barrel. Web sling, cleaning kit in the buttstock with a bayonet, and Marines still were, and I hope still are, trained to bayonet fight. That's the rifle. That's what we had. And every Marine, a rifleman. Now infantry especially, and I was an assaultman, specialized infantry, which maybe we'll get into later, but the M16A2. Full-size rifle, iron sights, 5.56. Now, its counterpart for a grenadier, which was, part of a fire team, is that M16A2 fitted with an M203 grenade launcher. Which basically means you have your regular rifle with a 40mm grenade launcher. Operates a lot like a single-shot shotgun mounted to the bottom, except in shooting shotgun shells, it shoots a 40mm grenade. There are different rounds for that weapon, although generally you'd have your training rounds. We call them the Cheeto rounds. And then for warfare, your HE high explosive rounds. Max effective range 350 meters. And I should give credit where credit is due. Some of this is coming from memory, and some of this I'm looking up on, military.com or marines.mil or something like that. But we very much had those 40 millimeter grenades. That was something, again, common to fire teams at the fire team level. A little bit of contradiction here on Wikipedia, and you got to remember this is 20 years ago for me, guys. 437 yards, 400 meters. Has a kill radius per Wikipedia of 5 meters, and that's a HEDP round. It should be noted you can fire that into defilade. You can fire it an indirect fire weapon, meaning you kind of lob it in there, or you can direct fire it if something is up close and personal. And there's a bunch of other rounds for that weapon, but that's the main one. Also, in addition to the 40 millimeter grenades, something we were issued and did carry, the M67 fragmentation grenade. The angry little baseballs. Max effective range, how far can you throw it? Weighs about 14 ounces, so about how far you can throw a 14-ounce baseball-shaped object. Per the wiki, it says injury radius of 15 meters and fatality radius of 5 meters. And unlike the movies, you don't just pull the pin and throw it. You have to pull the pin. There's also a thumb clip that you have to hit so that the spoon can fly off. The spoon is the thing that you're holding when you pull the pin out, and when you throw it, 4 to 5 seconds hopefully before that thing goes off. Now, what about handguns? Now, for this invasion, most infantry did not carry handguns. However, I did, and some other more specialized infantry did. I was an assaultman, which I might get into a little bit more about what assaultmen do later, but the Beretta M9. There may still have been some 1911s in service. I never saw any. By this time, this was 2003, and that came in service in, 1985, I believe. So by this time, that was what we saw. On our side, we saw plenty of other handguns on the other side, but for us, pretty much what we saw in the Marine Corps was the Beretta M9. Beretta M9, 9mm, 15 round capacity, max effective range of 50 meters. A lot of controversy over this handgun. I really like it. It's one of my favorite handguns. I had a lot more issues with the M16 in the sandbox than I ever had with the Beretta M9. That being said, if you need a handgun in a Marine Corps infantry context, things have gone really wrong. So handguns aren't used that much generally in the infantry. They're generally issued to you if you have another weapon other than a rifle. Also making up a very basic part at the fire team level, the M249 SAW squad automatic weapon. Fires the same round as the M16, the 5.56mm. Belts M855, and then a couple of tracers mixed in just for fun, actually to see where you're shooting, especially at night. But it's a belt fed or magazine fed. In theory, how reliable they are magazine fed or even belt fed is up for debate. They're not known for their reliability, but they are a machine gun. They are a light machine gun at the fire team level, a base of fire for the fire team. To try and stay consistent for the details I don't remember, I'm going to try and look up on Wikipedia. So verify by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Sustained fire 100 rounds a minute. Cyclic rate 700 to 850 rounds a minute. Effective range 700 meters to 800 meters depending on the barrel. Again, disintegrating belt. It would come in these drums that you would attach to the SAW. That's generally how they were run, unless literally you were in garrison and you just needed a weapon and you were a SAW gunner, in which case you put a magazine in it. They generally weren't run with a magazine. They're meant to be run with a belt. And that was the light machine gun for the Marine Corps Infantry, the M249 SAW. Again, I don't think they were very well liked, mostly because of their lack of reliability. Now, maybe some SAW gunner might disagree with that, but I think they do have a reputation for being quite finicky. Now, I mentioned the bayonet. The M7 bayonet is what we had. If you were issued a rifle, generally had an M7 bayonet, and we were trained how to use it. It's a good bayonet. It's big enough to be useful without being overly heavy. We also, as Marines, you might know, were well acquainted with the USMC K-bar. We were trained to fight with a K-bar. We were trained to use a K-bar, and I carried a K-bar, especially if you weren't carrying a rifle and a bayonet. A K-bar was kind of a standard practice. Now, I'm going to get into, and it's kind of, where do I draw the line here? Because I could go up to an M155 howitzer. But I think I'm going to draw a pretty linear line from the medium machine gun. Now, the medium machine gun, the 240 Bravo. The 240 Bravo, unlike its little cousin, had a really good reputation. Still does. It's a good workhorse medium machine gun. By medium machine gun, that means it fires a full-size rifle round. Opposed to an intermediate rifle round, it fires the 7.62 by 51 NATO, or better known as 308 in civilian terms. There's a minor variance, but you get the idea. A fantastic weapon, not really designed to be fired from the shoulder. You can, but it's meant to be fired off its bipod. And although you can shoot it with one person, it's meant to be used as a team. It takes more than one person to run that machine gun effectively. A gunner, an A gunner, and an ammo man. Because you have more than just that one machine gun. If you've never done a lot of machine gunning, that barrel can heat up rather quickly. That barrel has to be changed. Barrels are heavy. Also, in general, have a gunner. Assistant gunner will be in charge of feeding that ammo, keeping that gun fed, and things like that. And as you might imagine, machine guns can eat. It can be a hungry beast. And the ammo is not light. So that's why you need several people to effectively use a machine gun, a medium machine gun in the infantry. That's how they were deployed. That's how they were used. In general doctrine, that may have changed, but for the invasion of Iraq in general, talking about infantry on foot, mounted on a vehicle, not mounted on a tank, man-portable systems. 240 Bravo, again, good system, well liked, I think, by most that used it. Mass, this says 27.6 pounds, and I assume that's just with the one barrel, without ammo. Rate of fire, 650 to 950 rounds a minute. Effective range, 800 to 1800 meters. I think I'm going to forego the mortars, but just briefly mention that that was part of Marine Corps infantry, both 60 and 80 millimeter mortars. And I'm going to, anyway, keep this to small arms, and I think the M2, as cool a weapon as it is, the 50 cal is not a small arm. Technically, it's man-portable. Moving laterally, I think, I mentioned I was an assaultman, an MOS that no longer exists, but we were a specialized infantry specializing in demolitions. Now, the 0311, the rifleman, also was trained in how to use the AT-4. AT-4 is a rocket launcher. You might think of it as a bazooka. It's not really. That's not what it is, but that's what a civilian might think of it as. It's a rocket launcher. One-time use, rocket in a tube, got some pop-up sights, you shoot it, you throw it away. A very basic rocket launcher, man-portable, disposable, anti-tank weapon. An anti-tank AT-4, also used for bunkers and many other things. It says on Wikipedia not technically a rocket launcher, as the warhead is not propelled by a rocket motor, but rather a recoilless gun. Hey, you learn something new every day. Anyway, it's 84 millimeter, whatever you want to designate it as. Effective range 300 meters, point target, max firing range 500 meters. Area target. It has simple flip-up iron sights and 440 grains high explosive anti-tank heat round. And that was available to anybody in the infantry, basically, 0311s or anybody else. However, myself as an assaultman, one of the things that we had was the shoulder-fired multi-purpose assault weapon. You could put in several different kinds of rounds. It's kind of a wonky, strange weapon. You had this very strange kind of tracer firing apparatus on the side of the rocket launcher, and you were supposed to fire these tracers, and once that was on target, if your gun hadn't lost 0, then you would fire the rocket, and the rocket would go where the tracers were going. And a bunch of different rounds, you could load it over and over and over again, unlike the disposable AT-4. Bunch of different rounds. The most common one was green and yellow, high explosive. Used for all manner of harder targets, light armored vehicles, up into some tanks, bunkers, machine gun nests, things like that. Now, that was part of the role of the assaultman. Also, part of what we did was demolitions. We carried demolitions. When you needed something a little bit bigger than the M67 fragmentation grenade, we would carry satchel charges. If I remember correctly off from memory, a satchel charge is 16 1¼ pound sticks equaling 20 pounds of C4. So 20 pounds of C4 is one satchel charge. And you can make all kinds of stuff with that. Just throw the entire satchel charge. You can make Bangalore torpedoes if you don't have them already made. I'm going to get into what it is. You can make a shape charge. ATF probably doesn't want me to go into any more detail than that. For cutting through very thick steel. Also acquainted with the use of TNT and dynamite, blowing up bridges, blowing up infrastructure, enemy weapons, things like that. That's kind of the small arms of the U.S. Marine Corps invasion this time period, 2003. Things would change for my second deployment. Maybe I'll cover that a different time. A little bit better weapons, but when you think about that 20 years ago, we've come a long, long way in equipment and tactics and doctrine. We got a couple of, I don't even know if it was entire days, hours of mount training, urban warfare or urban operation kind of training. When I was done with my combat tours in the Marine Corps, you've probably heard this in the bio, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. We did urban warfare and desert warfare, had our own little villages and literal like actors that put you in this training village. All kinds of common scenarios to get Marines. And we trained others too. I remember training the Australians, having them come over and do some stuff. But mostly to train Marines to go over there in the sandbox. We learned a lot on that in that war. In a lot of ways, small arms, emergency medical, tactics and doctrines of urban warfare, vehicle operations, and dealing with IEDs and vehicle-borne IEDs, and all kinds of different things that we got. We come a long way, though, and I think it's good to remember the basics, what we had when we invaded Iraq for small arms. It was pretty basic, an M16A2 with iron sights, a web sling. I'm not sure how informative this is. I think there'll be a certain subsection that really like this, that really like the military history of weapons and things like that. For the average CCW person that's not really into history and military stuff, maybe not at all. Well, that's okay. If you guys like this and you want me to do maybe another one on the threat weapons, what the other side had, small arms wise, maybe I can do that too. If not, that's okay. You can reach me at goodshepherdtraining.com. If you like this content, appreciate the real-world first-hand experience that I try and give you guys, and more so in other episodes, apply it to your life and make you more effective in the personal defense world. Hopefully you appreciate that. You might want to consider becoming a patron. There should be a link in the show notes. Anyway, with that, tactical tip of the day. Although as assaultmen we were pretty acquainted with breaching with demolitions, det cord, C4, things like that, that's probably outside the scope of what you're going to be dealing with. However, we also carried, and not a weapon, I guess anything could be a weapon, but not intended as a weapon, we carried physical breaching kits, a sledgehammer, a hooligan tool, bolt cutters. We went into a lot of buildings. Sometimes we took out a whole wall. Sometimes we just beat down a door. Often, we just use that mechanical breaching kit. We would have one guy that was a breacher. He carried this kit like on his back with all these different tools. Generally a big, beefy hulk of a dude in the subsection, however we were configured to be the breacher. He'd breach and the point man will go in. Tactical tip in there is a sledgehammer is a pretty common tool that you can have. You can get a hooligan tool too and a bolt cutter. I encourage you to carry it or something like it maybe in your vehicle. You never know, and it doesn't have to be for urban combat operations. It could be for getting somebody out of a burning building. It could be for any number of things where you need them, but they can be quite useful. You'd be surprised what kind of doors you can get into with a sledgehammer. A sledgehammer, again, you go get one at Home Depot. They're a good tool to have. Also, not quite a hooligan tool, but also a good tool to have that's very similar, a fireman's axe. That's kind of what they're meant for, right? Gaining entry. So you might consider that. Be familiar with the use of those things. You may not be able to have a det cord. And some C4, probably have a sledgehammer. And as cool as it was to use det cord and C4, I'll be honest, we used a sledgehammer and or hooligan tool probably more often for actual entry into urban environments. Tactical verse of the day, Deuteronomy 20. When you go out to battle against your enemies and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them. For the Lord your God is with you, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. So it shall be when you are on the verge of battle, that the priest shall approach and speak to the people. And he shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are on the verge of battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart faint. Do not be afraid, and do not tremble or be terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. That's a verse I would read as a commander sometimes before we went on a mission. And if you're still in the professional gunfighting arena, or even if not, it's a good verse to know, a good verse to be able to flip to and read. It's amazing how fearless and courageous a man can be when he knows that his God fights for him. There's no contradiction in being a mighty warrior and being a man of God. Remember David, a man after God's own heart. David slayed man and beast. He said he killed lions and bears. He also, it was sung about him, killed tens of thousands. He was an impressive soldier on his own and a commander, a leader of armed men. There is no contradiction there. He was a man after God's own heart. With that, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.